Welcome to From the Ashes, the Dungeon Crawler Network podcast all about Ashes of Creation by Intrepid Studios. Bear witness to the rebirth of the MMORPG genre from the ashes of an industry that has left the gamers behind. I am your host, Aggelos, and I am joined once again by my co-GM over at Hands of Fate. That's Stormzlord. How are you, sir?
Doing great today.
Good to have you back, buddy. As you can probably notice, we're missing an alpha soul. Well, he's out having vacation with his family. He was going to try to remote in, and I was like, you know what? I'm going to find a replacement so that you can enjoy your time with your family. So he is off this week, but a face you probably have not seen in a while, and it's great to have him back. Telchar, guild leader of Sons of the Seven. How are you, sir?
Doing good. I'm glad to be back, and it has been a while.
It has really been a while. Yeah, man. Well, it's good.
I'm not good enough.
Oh, no. At least you're not an elf.
True.
Yeah. And a face you've probably not seen, and not one that we've even seen before. You're still not seeing him now, but hey, he's a cute little phoenix. How you doing, Zeke?
I'm really good. I'm excited to be here.
And because I didn't say it, I'm going to anyway. Another guild member of Mythic. So he is part of Gundle, who you've seen on the show before. And he recommended Zeke. And I've spoken with Zeke a few times. And he's done a couple videos as well. So he sounds pretty cool. I like him. How you doing, Zeke?
I'm great.
Ready
to get into the old school.
Old school. All right. So before we hop in, I guess I have to do a little bit. We're going to be talking this week something that's kind of near and dear to my heart, and will be probably a little meta, if you will. We're actually going to be talking old school versus modern MMOs, things that were good and are bad in old MMOs, and things that are good and bad in modern, and where we hope Ashes sort of settles. You know, I don't honestly think that modern MMOs are super great. But I also, while I look fondly on some of the classic ones, know that some of the things were stupid, and I'm glad to see them go. So I think we're going to have a fun conversation. Before we do not have any new patron subscribers this month. Actually, wait. Yes, we do. Oh, my goodness. I just almost forgot. Wow. I didn't have it written down. But anyway, we do actually have a new Patreon supporter this month, and that is Patrick Queen. I don't know why I almost forgot that. Thank you so much, Patrick. He's over there supporting us at patreon.com/Dungeon Crawler Network. He provides us with the torches that keep the lights going in our little tavern. I guess they're not torches, they're candles, but hey, they're awesome. Thank you so much. And of course, if you want to help support us, you can head over there and do that and get some awesome stuff, such as being able to listen to this episode a lot earlier than everybody else. I know that's one of our key things that we offer is all of our podcasts get released at least 24 hours early, sometimes even longer. If you can't support us there, you can also leave us an iTunes review where people can see that and know that we say real words, and sometimes they matter. We don't actually have any new ones this week, so I encourage you guys, if you have not written an iTunes review, going out there and do that, because that is awesome. All right, guys, let's go ahead and just jump right on into it. Old school versus modern MMO mechanics. I guess before we start, we should probably see where some of us started overall. I know I first started with Ultima Online, so I kind of go back a little bit. And I pretty much played everything else under the sun. Ultima Online I played for a couple years. Not really heavily, because it was my first MMO, so I was a complete noob at that point and had no idea what all I was doing. But eventually I kind of got that down. And then moved on to Dark Age of Camelot, and I was there for many years until World of Warcraft. I think the Burning Crusade is where I started WoW. And then pretty much everything else. I went back and tried a whole bunch of other ones. Do any of you guys remember an old MMO called A Tale in the Desert? No? Okay. This one's weird. There's not really any combat in it. And you want to talk about a social MMO? The whole concept of this thing was that you were placed back in ancient Egypt and you had to complete these trials to defeat, I don't know, some trickster god or whatever. But it was so complicated. It took an entire huge amount of people to do anything. Oh, it was insane. Insane. Storms, how about you? Where did you start?
So honestly, I didn't start that long ago, about 4 years ago. First one I picked up was ESO on the Xbox. Wasn't thrilled with it. Then I tried Neverwinter Nights, or Neverwinter, excuse me. So I really have done just 3, Neverwinter, ESO, and then Star Trek Online.
Okay.
So not that many years compared to other gaming types that I've done.
All right. Awesome. So you're more of in the modern-esque type era, I guess, post 2010, I guess.
Yeah.
When did Star Trek come out?
7 years ago.
Oh, yeah.
2011.
2011. Okay. Because I think that's probably one of the older of the ones you mentioned. Okay.
Yep.
All right. Telchar.
I started playing RuneScape first, I think, when I was a little kid. I played it when I was like 4th grade or something. But the real first MMO I got my hands on was Dark Age of Camelot. I was a pretty big noob at that. And also, I had a Mac growing up, so I could only play it at my friend's house on his PC. So it was a pretty hard experience trying to get into MMOs back then, but I was pretty addicted. After that, World of Warcraft, Vanilla WoW for something like 180 hours on my main or more. So I was pretty experienced at it back then. And then I jumped into, if you want to call it an old, it's still out now, but EVE Online is my other big time sink.
Gotcha. I would actually call that one of the older ones, because I'll say there are a few systems within EVE Online that would have been considered more old school and not modern. Which whenever I hear modern, I think of quit, get in, get out. You don't quit, get in, get out, do anything in EVE. So
no, there is definitely a time sink cost of that game.
Right. And Zeke.
I started in RuneScape. Got murdered by a few people, and then didn't really understand the game because I was brand new, and it had just came out. And then I played EverQuest like for a few hours, got murdered again, and then stopped playing that. And then I got into Phantasy Star Universe on Xbox 360, and then at that point I started really getting hooked on MMOs, so I got a PC, played Burning Crusade, and then got hardcore into WoW for like raiding in Wrath. And then I moved to SWTOR when Cataclysm failed, and played that for 6 years.
Okay. All right. So here's the one thing that I kind of want to hop in here. First thing, I don't even have it on my list, but I'm glad Telchar brought this up. The idea of the time sink and the time investment. The one thing that I think really separates a lot of the classics from the more modern is it used to take a long time to do anything, right? Now, there's some things which we'll talk about here in a little bit on what actually caused it to take such a long time. But there was a definitive design difference between the modern MMO and the classic ones. And they've even said this, the era of the get in, get out, the instant gratification gamer, we're seeing a lot of that with modern MMOs. The idea of catch-up mechanics every time a new patch comes out. Oh, you can't go through every single raid that existed before. So what we'll do is we'll provide this catch-up mechanic. So someone who's been playing the game nonstop, they've went through it all at the same difficulty level, but a new player can get in and get out and be as powerful as the person who's been playing for years in a matter of days, weeks, minutes. That's kind of how the newer games are designed. Is that a good thing for MMOs? At least Ashes. Let's relate it to Ashes. How accessible in terms of time sink are you hoping general systems are going to be? Zeke, what about you?
I really hope that they keep the game accessible enough to keep a population, but not cater so much to those people who are just like, I want to do everything and be good at everything with, an hour a day. Like that's I don't like that. I like having to earn everything. I used to grind a lot in those older MMOs, and like I earned those like end game pieces and stuff.
Absolutely. Telchar, what are your thoughts?
I think that Ashes can kind of hit two bases with that. They've already talked about their different quest system where they have like the grind quests, the kind of intermittent middle quest, and then like the big story quest and stuff like that. I think that they can kind of hit on the ability for people to come in, get quick gratification, do their daily, do some small daily or something like that, and then get out for those that are casual. But they can also include the things that made those old games good, the long, big, huge story quests. I'll give the example of like, I haven't yet seen another thing in like what WoW was with the Hunter bow quest from old school Molten Core. That was something that I did. It took me almost like 8 weeks to complete, like constant play. That's something that Ashes, I think, can allow for, is that you can do a daily quest and get small, generous rewards for what you're doing for your time. But then if those that want to devote their life to, whatever you're going to call it, can also go in and go hardcore. Doing both is really healthy for the community, in my opinion.
Right. And I know a lot of modern games aren't doing that at all. They're just going, hey, I almost want to say games are almost targeting people that they know they're going to be gone in 6 months. Like,
that's a majority of the people that are in that market right now. I think that a lot of people that are of the type that are willing to commit to it are not playing them anymore because they're a minority, the 1%, and that's not what makes money.
Yeah, no, I agree. Storms, what about you?
Well, how do you do this? So I like the fact of catch up sometimes on the games I don't have the time to put into, right? Like ESO, I put hours and hours and hours and almost probably a year now in the ESO, just straight playtime. I enjoy Neverwinter. I enjoy Star Trek Online, but I don't have the time to dedicate to those as much as I do ESO. I still want to do some of the end game stuff, so I use some of the catch-up mechanics for those. So there's a balance to it. I don't want to give away the store with the catch-up, but I want to give a person who really wants to attain that the ability to do that maybe a different route than just grinding. But it's really a tricky balance between giving away the store and having a little bit of gratification because it did take some work to get it done.
Kind of going off the rails there, and the fact that Storms was mentioned about these other games, I almost feel like in my mind, what I'm looking for in an MMO and what I'm hoping Ashes is able to accomplish is that MMO home, if you will. I remember playing World of Warcraft, even Dark Age of Camelot back in the day, because I played that for about 4 years straight, where it was pretty much the only game I played ever, right? World of Warcraft was something where, especially early on, when it actually required guilds to do a lot of stuff, I was on every day if it was for nothing more to find out what my friends were doing online. And that kept me playing that game over and over and over again. So there really wasn't this desire to do all these other games, which the way the games are designed now, they're assuming you are going to hop around, and therefore you get that mentality of, I need the catch-up mechanic because I don't just play one MMO anymore. I'm playing ESO, I'm playing WoW, I'm playing Final Fantasy XIV, I'm playing... Well, I'd say Eve, but if you do anything casual in Eve, you're not doing anything in Eve. That's that one's still kind of holding on to its roots. I don't know. Is that something that's a bad feeling? Like,
I think that one of the big issues that games these days have come across is that they either are intentionally or unintentionally designed to not hold your attention for very long. The theme park is a very short ride, and they know that. Some of them that have subscriptions or otherwise know that they read. They may even do this like case study in the back. They see number of users online for a certain amount of time per day. They build the content around catering to that group versus not realizing that the reason why no one's online is because the content is dry already. So it's like kind of like a catch-22 that you have to build engaging long-term, like player-driven content to create an environment where people would be willing to spend 60 hours a week playing the game. You have to have both.
I know we're going to go into this a little bit, but I don't necessarily agree with the idea of just the player-generated content. Yes, I believe that's something that's awesome. That's where you get the amazing stories. I do think theme parks can be fulfilling in a way if they have multiple things that you can do, multiple catered events that you can do. Because I remember, like I said, playing WoW earlier on, I always had things I could do. Now they obviously have a very large studio and were able to actually cater to a lot of different play styles and a lot of different things that you could log in and do every single day. And that's something that I would be willing to actually do. Part of this, and some people are probably going to hate me right off the bat, but I don't really care. I am a big proponent that the Asian MMOs are what killed MMOs or the way we play them nowadays because of the way that they're designed. And they're designed for the culture that they were within. I know a lot of Korean MMOs are played in their internet cafes where you're paying per hour to sit in there and play anyway. So what do? They make it super grindy. And they also make it very cash shop heavy. That's where we see a lot of the pay to win stuff, because what they're doing is they're targeting the consumer going, the person's already paying per hour to sit in this place. If we make it super grindy, maybe they'll buy these pay to convenience items. Why not? You know, you're not gonna sit here for 100 hours and pay that when you would want to be doing something else. That's where you start seeing the rise of the pay to convenience items. They also know that because of the culture that's over there and the way they generate these MMOs, which are essentially just the same, it really does feel like it's the same engine with just new skins slapped on it for each and every MMO that comes out over there. But they know the next hotness is coming out in 6 months and everyone's going to jump to it. So they intentionally design only enough content for 6 months. So when these things get ported over, that's why people are like, wow, it was really active. And then you start seeing the numbers, like if it's on Steam, you see really high at launch. And then a few weeks in, if there's no bugs or if it's smooth, it starts dropping because people start racing to end game. They're spending the money to get to end game. Hey, we're there. Oh, wow, there's nothing here, because they realized, oh, I've done everything already, and this is all the game had, because by the time most people would have gotten here naturally, they're off to the next thing. I kind of have a glossed off face here. No one agrees with me on that. Did I just...
No, I was just letting someone else talk, but I think that the issue goes back to what I was saying before, is that the developer or the publisher might say, what are the active number of users for other titles that we published before? Why take the risk and dump in a lot of time to develop a system that's outside of that standard deviation or whatever you're going to call it? It takes a risk jump for them to go outside that status quo, and that's the symptoms. The symptoms are there now. We see that's what's happened to MMOs, is that the success of WoW happened, the vanilla WoW, into what it is now. And, you know, the game has had somewhat of a resurgence in the past couple of years because they've done a pretty good job of trying to fix a lot of the issues that they came up with. But overall, the amount of hype around the game and how unique it was that affected the industry, that all the other MMOs, I feel like, are possibly trying to emulate that. You know, I mean, for a while we got the WoW killer possibilities with all these different games and stuff, and none of those ever actually delivered because they were trying to emulate something but also reduce the amount of risk involved. They were not putting anything in that would cause them to take a financial risk. It was literally just copy the best of what we can from the game, but not actually do anything that would set ourselves apart.
Right.
And
I think you're
that's
right.
that's why we're here today. Is that the Asian MMOs are their own thing. They do their own thing, but there's no Western MMOs that have succeeded. Like WildStar, for example, it did a really good job of trying to target that in-game raider thing, but that's not what keeps MMOs alive. You have to have that fully flushed, healthy across the board community to make the end game rating a viability. It's just an example.
You got to give everybody something to do.
Whether it's raiding or crafting or something, everybody has different play styles. And if you aren't giving everybody something to do, they're not going to come back. And I think you're absolutely right with regards to the homogenization of MMOs. It's happened to movies and TV and everything else. The lack of risk to go out there is tremendous. If you're bored and you're sitting there saying, we could spend $20 million in a big risk or spend $20 million with little risk, let's follow the no risk line. I think Ashes is doing a great job not following that mentality.
You know, as we were sitting here, just sitting here, I was starting to think about it. If you sit down and really think about it, you know how we had the WoW clone here in the West? Almost every single MMO that comes out of the East is copying the same template as well, just more of a PvP centered. But that goes all the way back to probably one of their more popular PvP MMOs ever, which is like Lineage, which I still have no idea how Lineage brings in the amount of money it does in Korea. It's not open anywhere else, but it brings in more than all their modern games still over there. I almost feel like all other games in Korea are just Lineage clones. As we have WoW clones, they have Lineage clones. That's pretty funny.
I think it goes back to that first impression thing. Like, the one that has the, like, a lot of people, like, you know, people still go back and play vanilla WoW servers. You know, like they go to Nostramos or whatever and they play that. They demanded that Blizzard make a vanilla WoW permanent, you know, the classic that they're doing. You know, that same kind of thing happens with the one that you like, and it happens to hit all the marks, scores 10 out of 10. Even though the graphics or whatever aren't updated, that doesn't matter. People still play it just because that first impression hit them the hardest, that nostalgia. Plus, then you compare it to all the other things, and it's like, wow, that was actually not a one-hit wonder. It's actually really good. You know, you try your base, you try your different flavors, and you're like, yeah, let's go back to the thing we know. You know,
sure.
Look at the way they did ESO. When you started out at first in Ebonheart, you started out in Shadowfen, or whichever one it was, but it wasn't Skyrim-ish. And when I had started ESO on the Xbox, only thing I'd done with Bethesda was Skyrim. And I get in there and I see all these giant mushrooms. I'm going, this isn't what I signed up for, right? So I just put it away and did something else. Is that remembering and nostalgia what you've done before, you have to have some way in the new game to bring that forward. And I'm not sure what Ashes is doing that, but it's working, because I've got that same feeling when I go in, I see what I'm expecting to see.
For me, it was a nostalgia hit that made me back Ashes in the first place, and it was their corruption system. Because it reminded me of the Karma. I always say Karma, but I don't know if it had a different system. But the PKing system in Ultima Online was similar to what they're doing in Ashes, where, you know, you could kill anybody, but then you were negative, and then guards would kill you, other players could kill you, and then there was a risk. That's actually, that nostalgia trip is what made me back Ashes in the first place, was I'm like, oh, someone's actually doing something like that, which I think is amazing. And a lot of the PvE Care Bears out there, I will say that, who think all PvP should be completely separate, are not going to like Ashes because of this. But that was actually one of my favorite things. And I'll tell you what, when I went into Dark Age of Camelot, I missed it. I wasn't a PKer in Ultima Online, but I'll tell you what, there's plenty of times I wish I could have stabbed that stupid troll who would not move out of the door and I couldn't get through it because he's on my team. The guy in World of Warcraft who intentionally trolls his own faction by getting on a mammoth and standing on the mailbox so you can't reach it, or the quest giver. People would do that, and I know some people are like, oh, they're just, it's an act. No, a lot of people did it on purpose. You know, they wanted to troll. I'm an AFK here on the biggest mount possible, so that way no one else can click on the quest giver or can click on the mailbox. Oh man, I would have taken the corruption hit to stab that person while they were AFK. And Ashes giving us that ability, and this is kind of going into that old school versus modern, that sense of being able to do anything that you want to an extent, was something that UO had for me. Being able to kill anybody you wanted if they did something wrong to you was something I think is missing in modern MMOs, and I'm glad to see that brought back. Now, there's consequences. You can't just go off and, I feel like, stabbing storms because I don't like storms and nothing's going to happen, you know? I can stab Telchar, nothing's going to happen. No, that's not the case. I stab them. Well, I better be prepared to accept the risk of now everyone's mad at me and going to hunt me down as a player killer because, you know.
Now Zeke's going to hunt your bounty.
Yeah. Unless everyone hated Telchar and Storms, in which case I'm hailed as a hero for slaying these evil people. These trolls, you know, in which case, no, I'm not going to mess with him. He killed Telchar, the biggest troll in the server. It's okay. We'll let that go. So that's kind of neat, and I'm glad to see that come back. Corpse runs, guys. This is a couple things I wrote down. Everyone remember having to run back to your corpse. I know in Ultima Online you had to run back in order to get your gear. We're not going to see gear dropping unless you are a corrupted player in Ashes. But in Dark Age, you had to go back to reclaim experience and things like that. Is Corpse Run something we actually want to see? Did that provide for the MMO, or is it not really matter?
So. I played Darkfall Online for a while when it first came out, and like that was kind of like what Ash is going for, where it's like player-driven everything, sieges and all that. And when you died in a war, if you want your stuff back or whatever, you'd have to get there. But you'd also have to risk getting killed again trying to get your stuff back. Or you'd get there and it would just be gone. You'd be like, well...
So it's not an MMO, but corpse runs in Minecraft, which that was the first time I've had experience with that, right? And I played it with my twins when they were 12, 13, and they played like forever. We played the whole weekends at a time. Part of the fun was you had to make it back in time to get stuff before somebody else could get to it, or they disappeared. So part of the fun was doing that, and if you did die in a way you couldn't get to it, your stuff was gone. So you have to be careful what you took with you.
Telchar. Issue I have with corpse runs wasn't so much regaining the stuff, but it was actually getting back to the fight in the first place. A lot of modern MMOs, ESO in particular, one thing that really grates on me with ESO, and the reason why I bring up ESO is we obviously run another show about ESO called Tales of Tamriel. It's been going for like 175 episodes now, so for quite a while. So it's one of the MMOs that I have the most recent experience with. When you die, you can literally consume a soul gem and res right there on the spot. Now, obviously, there's a few quid pro quos, if you will, saying that you can, or, you know, if you're in the middle of a raid fight, like an instance dungeon and it's a boss fight, and until everyone in your party's dead or the boss is dead, you can't res. But anywhere else, you can. That really... that took something away from me, because... you notice the players jumping off buildings now because it's faster, and if they die, they just res there. That really didn't happen in older MMOs where you had to run to your corpse and get stuff back, because it's like, ooh, if I jump and die, maybe I'll bug out or I won't be able to get back to that spot.
There's something important about that.
Yeah, Telchar.
Yeah, that was one of the things that, like, I think you remember back to, like, I mean, RuneScape was my first example of that. Like, if you died out in the free area, whatever the hell it's called, I can't remember. Like, it was the
wilds or something.
Yeah, the wilds. Eventually, they believe they did have where you dropped certain things, like certain items would drop from you. I would like that kind of thing because it incentivizes players to create the right, like, to act the right way, but you can't punish. If people go, like, for example, you come into the castle siege area, you're there for a reason. There should be some amount of risk reward for taking things into that zone, in my opinion. It's like running back to possibly collect your fallen corpse that drops certain things would be worth it. But then certain other areas, it might make sense to. So what I'm trying to say is that there should be a variability. Some areas need to have that, some don't need to have that. It just depends on what the environment is that would make it so that there's an incentive to have to run back, or the stress of making a bad decision. You know, like for example, in the castle siege area, if you you go pink slips and you throw everything you have on your that character, you know, your good gear, and you go in and there's like a percentage drop of that kind of stuff, and you know, perhaps you might be you have like a certain time window, like a 10-minute window, and then that gear becomes lootable by somebody. You have to get back quickly, you know, stuff like that. So.
That is fascinating, and I will say I think I was having this conversation with Sinbad a little while ago. The idea of, they brought up ship battles and stuff, and how I think that those are decisive. In fact, that Steven has come out and said that if your ship sinks, you cannot just resummon it in the water. You'd have to go back to land to resummon the ship again. So it's almost a sense of a corpse run, because battles requiring you to run back is something that I think is important for PvP with a purpose, not just a Zerg fest, or like what we saw what is in the Memorial District in Imperial City before they made the change, where everyone just spawned pretty much right at the same spot and we'd all just keep jumping down. It was an AP farm. That cheapens what you're doing. There was no reason why we were doing that, other than from a game mechanic side of, we wanted to farm AP. Is that something that's important? Well, not in the greater story of the world. Did we do anything in Imperial City? Did we push faction control in Imperial? No. We just killed the other two factions over and over and over again. They killed us over and over and over again just to farm. It was stupid, more or less. But it was probably one of the best ways to get some of the, you know, the gear you needed that you had to buy with the alliance points and whatnot. But, you know, there's certain things that corpse runs, when they changed how spawns worked, and if you didn't own the district, you didn't spawn in the district, that all stopped. Because then you got ported 2 zones over and you had to run back. And then it became more objective-based. They changed how the meta worked by causing people to run back. If you died and lost, more often than not, you gave up on that objective and said, okay, well, clearly Ebonheart Pact is just all over the Memorial District in Imperial City. Let's go to the Elven District or whatever and capture that instead, because we don't have the numbers to take them out or the skill to take them out, so we'll just go another way.
A simple change, directed strategy change.
And corpse runs, I think, would be a way of making sure that content remained not difficult, but there was a reason to do it.
Meaningful.
Yeah, meaningful.
So, like, one of the things that, like, WoW did well, I think, in vanilla, I don't know if it still exists now, but, like, in PvP, there was, like, you take their dog tagged kind of mechanic. You actually have to sit down and, like, use, like, a 3-second channel to take their dog tags, and that means that their corpse can't be walked back to. But, like, I remember in, like, Outback Valley, you could when you controlled the spot, you spawned there, but you could also run back to your corpse if you wanted to. Like, there's every 30 seconds there was a respawn that, like, popped you, and then you could go back to the front line. But if someone didn't loot your dog tags, you could run out of the graveyard before you popped, like on the cycle, and get back to your corpse. So, like, it was a strategy, it was a risk. Like, do I spend the minute and a half running back to my corpse, possibly to get it eaten from me right when I, you know, like, as soon as they get close, you know, somebody comes along and sees that there's still a corpse here, they might come and just loot the dog tags and take the honor points or whatever. But, you know, there's like a risk reward for it. I think so. Like, having that dynamic was really fun for the bigger battlegrounds like Warsong or Outback Valley and stuff. So with Ashes having these big zone-wide PvP areas, like castle sieges, city sieges, that kind of stuff, having that risk-reward choice of, like, oh, our squad got wiped, but we have reinforcements there engaging the enemy, we might be able to get back to our bodies, you know, versus having to wait for that minute and 30-second cycle or whatever to get re-rezzed. So take that choice.
Right. And it would also be interesting whether or not, like, depending on how they do the return system, I know WoW allowed you to bind your soul at different places and whatnot, different inns, and that's where you would hearth to. What would be interesting is if you respawned at a shrine or something that was close by and you could make that choice. Do I run back to my corpse and respawn there? Or if the person took the dog tag, so to speak, now I can't respawn there and I have to release my soul back to the inn where I bound it at, and now that's 3 times as far. So it's like, do I go, even as a ghost, you would have to run back to one place or the other. It's like, do I take the risk of making it to my body and maybe not being able to get to it, or it already be destroyed, or whatever the case may be, and then have to turn around and run twice as far back to the inn to respawn there? I think that'd be kind of neat to see.
It goes back into that concept of the, with Ashes being a kind of dynamic world where, if let's say the front lines might change over time too. It's like you thought that you were going to be able to go back to your respawn point, but let's say the enemy forces were able to, disable that respawn point. That could change your strategy entirely. Like that's the kind of grand scale strategy stuff that games like what Ashes is trying to do, I think, with the nodes and stuff could allow for with the dynamic of choice.
Right. I think this one's going to be pretty easy. Something else I wrote down. Requiring either ammunition or reagents to cast spells or to use range weapons or even to do anything of your class needs. Consumables to do standard abilities. Is that something we'd actually want to see in Ashes, or was that a nice quality of life change that they made and removed it?
I think that's one of those things that is from a different age and doesn't really belong in future MMOs, just for the reason that, like, now when we want to go out to do these things, we would prefer to have space in our bags. Or if we did want to have reagents, then maybe have a separate bag, like what was it, Guild Wars 2 or whatever.
Mm-hmm. Can I throw a little mix in here, because I think this will be fun. In a theme park, I agree. It was a needless thing to require reagents to do stuff. The way Ashes is described, and like what we're seeing the current trend is survival games, right? That's part of survival, being prepared for it. Do you think Ashes, with like changing seasons and things like that, is that a part of the survival aspect we'd want to see? Or should we just keep that to Conan Exiles or something?
I think that it's okay if you have a similar level of cost of doing business for all classes. Mm-hmm. So basically, there's no overall upkeep difference between warriors, mages, rogues, hunters, etc. The overall, because the concept is like, oh, the hunter shouldn't really be taking as much damage to their armor, or their weapon doesn't get degraded over time because of shooting it technically. So like the arrows are their repair cost. That was what they kind of tried to do in WoW. But the having to maintain your weapons and stuff as a melee character, that should all be the same. Right. Well, more than that. That was an addition to your damage. It wasn't like that was just a buff. But I'm talking about the repair costs, the upkeep, the money sink stuff is what that is really for. So if it's all across the board even, it's fine.
Yeah, there were some classes in WoW that were just significantly more like money sinky.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And the reagents to cast spells was never a WoW thing, with the exception of buff abilities. But in Ultima Online, if you were a spellcaster, you were pretty powerful. Like, I think the meta eventually became, if you're not a spellcaster, melee wasn't required. They always wanted range. So archers, which had to have arrows, and spellcasters, you actually needed reagents to cast any spell in early Ultima Online. So that was an interesting concept. Storms, what about you? Is that something you think is just relegated to the past, or would you like to see Ashes of Creation do something like that?
Honestly, it comes to me anyways, right? It comes down to reality versus a game. In reality, there's things you have to do because it's reality. In games, there's certain things we want to do because we can't do them in reality. So do we balance out by having to add some arbitrary reality to it? Honestly, I don't think it's a good idea. I think it's like, mini maps are maps. They're here to stay. And I don't think taking them away is a good idea. I don't think adding reagents back in to cast is a good idea. Much like if you're a melee class, you're not going to be repairing your sword right there during the fight, right? You're not going to be sharpening your sword during the fight. There's going to be a balance. You have to go back and you have to gather everything in order to spell. I get that, but not in the middle of it. I don't think so.
Okay.
I think that one of there is room for reagents, but not in things that are quality of life parts for individual players. I think that anything that's civilization level, or whatever you want to call it, can have reagents. So such as siege equipment, capital ships, possibly caravans, things like that. All of those kind of things can have
spells.
Group spells, possibly the elemental that you summon as a big, all the summoners or whatever that it ends up being, that can have a significant upkeep cost and a way of sinking out money or whatever resources from the game. Because that's not a requirement to have, and you being a civilization versus civilization willingness to commit resources to that thing is something that your enemies have you can take an advantage weighing. We made this choice, they make their choice, and whoever had the best strategy involving that—that's what determines the fate of the battle, plus skill, etc., etc. But the economic changes that brings, especially if those are finite reagents, it adds another level of the game.
And that's kind of what I'm hoping they do, bring back reagents to cast spells or ammunition for certain weapons, depending on, like you said, the big meta level, the big grand scale. I don't think PvP should come down to necessarily just who has the bigger army or whatnot, or who is the most players. Skill, I think, definitely comes into it, but I think with the type of game that this is, and Telchar, as you know, with Sons of the Seven being more crafting economic based, you would want to be able to fund a war. Someone who had the more money, hey, guess what? We have 3 times as many siege equipment because, hey, guess what? We could afford to build it and make it, and that, I think, should be part of this. People always say, you hear the concept in here, people win wars and stuff, but money really if you don't have money, you're not going to win a war either, because that's, you're buying resources for your army, and that needs to be something that I don't think should just be on the player level, but on the army commander level. And kind of going out of the box again, even World of Warcraft, I remember watching the Warcraft movie. I know some people hate that movie, but it was just funny. Like, Medivh could cast spells, but even he, when he wanted to make the golem, still had to craft the golem to infuse magic into it. Lower level spells, he could just do it whenever he wanted. But for the bigger level stuff, there was still preparation that had to be done in order to accomplish a certain task. And I would love to see reagents and ammunition come back into an MMO, just maybe not on the player level, like you said, Telchar. The final thing we have to talk about tonight, which I personally hate, that is dungeon finders and anything pretty much cross-server. I think we could pretty much roll out cross-server related stuff just due to the fact that each server is supposed to have its independent story with how nodes are done, and its own economy. They probably don't want to do a lot of cross-server anything unless there happens to be a server merge. But dungeon finders, in my opinion, pretty much have been the death knell of the social aspect of MMOs. Because I know even in our ESO guild, Storms and I, who run that, we constantly have issues with the hundreds of people we have in that guild filling dungeon groups, because it's just easier to queue random than find someone in your guild to do it with. And that's a growing thing. Dungeon finders, guys, what are your thoughts? Or I should say dungeon finders. This should be any type of automated group making.
I mean, I think that kind of stuff, like when you remove the need for you to like go and be like, hey buddy, do you want to join me on this dungeon? It kind of just creates this mentality where every single person is just like, this is basically just a single player game, but I can occasionally ask people to help me. And like, I don't want to see that in Ashes. Like something in SWTOR, like that happened in SWTOR where originally there was no dungeon finder, and then like I think it might have been the beta when there wasn't a dungeon finder. It might have launched with it, but back then you had to like talk to everyone on your server to do these dungeons. You had to like wait right out of the entrance and be like, does anyone want to do this with me?
Mm-hmm.
And that was fun because you made friends and you got groups, and then a guild was created through people you've just met, and like that was beautiful.
No, I agree. It definitely was, and it did create a sense of server community because you would start getting to see names of people who you recognized because you ran with them a few times. They're always there, and they were either good or bad. They had that, fame or infamy kind of feel. Like you would know, oh, you don't group with that person because they're a ninja looter, or they'll wait till the boss is almost dead, turn around, PK you, and then take everything for themselves. There were things that you could do on a server level in a server community, which is, I really think, what Ashes is trying to do with the node system, a sense of server identity. But you lose that with automated group finders because then people just tend to lose the social aspect or really care one way or the other, because it's like, okay, I can be a ninja, I can be a troll, but if I can be automatically group find, you don't want me in the group, that's fine. I'll just regroup up and I'll get another group, and maybe they won't pay attention to my name. Thoughts?
So I was gonna say, the thing that Ashes kind of already commented on is the tavern system, with the group finder being that it exists within that. So it's geographically located. You actually have to go to a location to enter a queue where it's going to help you match against with other people that are also looking. But that the other thing to remember is that most other games that are out these days are faction based, where the PvP derives from that forced friction between those existing horde versus alliance, blah blah blah. The example, the polar system goes for every game out there except for something like Eve, but that's not really the same kind of game. Going back to that geographic location thing, here's the hypothetical situation. So like, let's say I'm tavern owner. That's what I want to do. I know that there is a really popular raid it's here on the map. It's a world feature. It's going to be there. So when the servers open, I run to that location and I set up a tavern there with a specific. I don't care who the other people in my area are. Like, my peers, my allies. I just want to have a tavern here. So like, you set up shop down the street from the place, and by the luck of you or your friends, you happen to be the closest tavern to that dungeon, that raid or whatever. You're going to have a lot of advantage with people coming to meet. It's like a cluster, like a hotspot. Everyone's going to come here to meet. They're going to come here to buy buffs. They're going to come here to blah, blah, blah. So that social aspect of it that we're talking about is much more important when there is geographic locations that matter. And that's what Ashes is trying to do.
Yeah, and like something that I'd like them to do is like make it so that all the quests or dungeons and raids and whatever, make it hard enough to where you don't want to just bring a bunch of random people that are just from any server. You want to be like, okay, you've got this guy here, and I've played with him a few times. He's a good tank, blah, blah, blah. This guy's a bard. He's like the best bard ever. I want him on my team. And like, you see all these people in the tavern, but like, you don't want to just grab like Joe Blow who says he's ready to do this, and you want to like, pick and choose your people, and like, it keeps a social aspect, and it makes it so people have to socialize. They can be like, hey, I'm new, bring me along for this, and then that person gets brought on, and then they build a reputation, and that's beautiful.
I think we talked about it in the tavern episode. Even like, there's going to be a lot of like prestige that comes from like people swag walking around with all their good raid gear and stuff at the tavern. Like, damn, those guys are decked out. I'm going to join them, you know, whatever. Right. Like, that's going to, it forces, instead of it like being that you can kind of exist wherever within the world and just kind of teleport to it, there's going to be that locality that helps that like, oh, that's the Sons of the Seven. Those guys are awesome. I'm gonna go join them or whatever. You know, like you're gonna see the group of people running around with all their good shit if you're like a low level player. That doesn't happen when you have Raid Finder and Dungeon Finder, because it skips that forced nature to actually have to travel to it. And then also, you know, everybody in Orgrimmar and WoW has a bunch of good gear on. Everybody in all the different raids, all the different guilds and stuff, yeah, they all, yeah, like, okay, it's just, oh, no, not significant. But if you live in an area like, oh, I have my freehold just down the street over by the woods over there, and some big guild moves into the area next to you, it's gonna be like, wow, like, oh, this is so cool.
Mm-hmm. There's something to be said for that geographic recognition from not just automatically queuing, because it is nice when you get a queue and you see someone with all this awesome raid gear on. I know that happened a lot with WoW with me, when you would queue in and you'd look over and you'd see your tank, and you could tell if they were in just random mismatched gear. You're like, oh, this is going to be awful. This is a brand new tank. They're probably just leveling up. Oh, it's going to be awful. You've seen some guy in like a top tier stuff, and you're like, oh, this is going to be an easy run. But it's different from when it was you saw them sitting outside the group advertising. You saw the name, you look down. Oh, I know that. Yes, I want to go with you. Please take me, because you saw who they were. It's different. It definitely is different. And I really want to see the social aspects of the game come back. I want people to have a reason to be in a guild that modern games don't really have, for lack of, you know, content or, you know, ease of just randoming up, queuing up, and just doing it. Storms.
That randomness, yeah, it takes away. Take for instance, last couple of days I've been trying to get into ICP, right? Because I needed a particular gear from there. And when I'd go in there with guildmates, and we didn't make it, but we tried, and we'd help each other, and you'd work with it, and we'd all give up together. Right, we wouldn't say, you know, kick the healer or kick the tank, right, or kick the DPS. We decided together, you know what, as a group, we're just not going to make it. But you go in as a pug, you're like, if DPS isn't coming up, you kick the DPS, get the next one. If they're not working, you kick them, and get the next one. You're not building that community, that familiarity with the other folks, and trying to help them improve and help yourself improve. You miss that when you have that dungeon finder.
Right. Absolutely.
I'd like to kind of touch on another thing that we didn't speak about before, the geographic thing. So like a lot of the decisions and evolution of the nodes in Ashes is going to be based on success in possible dungeons or raids. So like, for example, when the big world event happens that goes from tier, as you tier up, you may actually have to attempt that several times. Like if you fail that event, you de-level. So like that strife and stress causes the community hopefully to come together. Some people might leave because they're like, no, there's no way that these guys are ever going to beat the Goblin Horde or whatever. The next time they actually once they re-level, and then it happens again. So like that communication of like, hey, what did we do wrong, or how can we do better next time? We need this resource, or we need this, and this, and like that kind of like community effort to survive against not only the peers around you in the PvP environment, but also that PvE threat, and then the continuous threat of that helps build communities. So, I can just imagine the amount of like overall kind of like friendships that are built from people that you just randomly meet that are your neighbors in the world. Like, you kind of just going around outside where you decided to plop your freehold down, and you see somebody else that's right there next to you. You're probably going to be in a similar alliance to them. You're going to want the same things that they do. So you should be able to forge a bond with those that are in your peerage, which other games don't have because there's no geographic centralization.
Yeah.
That actually gave me kind of a thought too, is like something that we've talked about in Mythic is like, for raids, we're going to need PvPers and stuff to like protect our raids because of all the open world stuff where we don't want people interrupting. Having all these things that are open world and no dungeon fighter, you're going to have to make friends with other groups if you don't have those people available. So you're going to be like, oh, I need Sons of the Seven. I need you guys to help us when we're doing our raids so that we get protected. And then you have these friends and you're like, oh, hey. And you can just call on them whenever, and you know that they're going to help you out for your node war or whatever.
That'll be 350.
Yeah.
I need tree fish.
Sons of the Seven don't do anything for free. Gotta show them the bling first. All right, guys, I think we're nearing the end of this show. Let's go ahead and let people know where they can find you and all that fun stuff. Let's go ahead and start with Telchar so Zeke can figure out what he has to say.
You are muted.
Yeah, I just wasn't pushed to talk. So I'm Telchar. I'm the guild master of Sons of the Seven. We're a mercantilism and PvX focused guild. Right now we have about 43 people that are scheduled for Alpha 1. So we should be coming onto the scene pretty strong. And if you're interested in that kind of thing, please check us out on our website at sonsoftheseven.com.
There you go. Zeke, what about you, buddy?
I am the recruitment officer for Mythic. We're a hardcore PvX raiding, PvP, all the good stuff, but mostly focusing on world firsting. You can find us on the forums. I'm sure Aggelos still has our link. Gundle has that.
I probably do, but you should probably send it to me anyway.
Okay, I'll send it. I'm also on YouTube. I don't have my own little URL yet because I don't have quite enough subs, but I could send him that too, I guess. You can find me there. I'm mostly just going to be doing hardcore themed like talks like PvP or raiding, stuff like that. And yeah, that's what I do.
All right. Storms.
Well, you can find me at Stormzlord at Twitter, at digitalpiperstudios.com. We're building more games. Find me on Saturdays running PvP for ESO. Every other day, you can pretty much find me some type of PvP in ESO. And looking forward to when you can find us all in Ashes in PvP.
There you go. And, of course, you can follow me on Twitter at Aggelos, AGGELOS_DCN. Yeah, and if you're interested in joining us, meaning Stormzlord and myself, as well as all the rest of our members in Hands of Fate, the Ashes of Creation chapter for the Dungeon Crawler Network, a gaming community forged by the listeners of our gaming podcast, we cover a wide range of gaming preferences and play styles. So from the casual to the hardcore, we have all of it, and we try to support everyone, and we can enjoy each other's company while we do that. We are a PvX guild because we do a little bit of everything. We'll be based out of the North American data center with players from all around the world. We have scheduled events for each region's prime time. So if you are an EU or Oceanic resident and want to play on the North American servers, maybe you should check us out. Guild's focus is on progression rating, small-scale PvE, crafting, gathering, node-based PvP, aka the open world, and of course, community growth. Check out everything handsoffateaoc.com. You can also follow everything else we do as a network over at dungeoncrawlernetwork.com. There you can find links to all of our social media, including Twitch, YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook. Be sure to check out our Patreon if you want to help support us over there at patreon.com/dungeoncrawlernetwork. And you can also support us by leaving us a 5-star review on iTunes so people know that we are a real podcast, that we say real words, and sometimes it matters. Thank you for joining us on this episode of From the Ashes, and we will see you next time. See you later, everybody.